Hola, bienvenidos. Soy Damián Kirchner, director de Mediamorfosis. Karim Ben Khelifa es un fotógrafo de guerra que asume nuevas herramientas narrativas, además de la cámara fotográfica, para contar historias de no ficción periodísticas y documentales. Primero lo hizo con The Enemy, un extraordinario documental inmersivo en realidad virtual, donde exponía a dos enemigos irreconciliables y uno podía dialogar en el medio de esos dos enemigos irreconciliables. Hoy vuelve a tomar Karim Ben Khelifa un riesgo artístico importante presentando 7 Grams, una obra en realidad aumentada donde denuncia lo que está sucediendo en el Congo con la extracción esclava del litio para crear celulares y toda la tecnología que empresas de todo el mundo están utilizando y mirando para otro lado cuando se trata de la explotación esclava de esas minas en el Congo. Karim es de origen tunecino, trabaja en Bélgica, en Alemania, y en este diálogo que tiene con Arnau Gifreu va a exponer cómo se puede usar las narrativas inmersivas en no ficción para hacer periodismo.
Good morning, good afternoon, buenos días, buenas tardes. Welcome to Mediamorfosis. I'm Arnau Gifreu. I'm part of the Mediamorfosis team. And today we have a special guest, a very special guest, I would say, Karim Ben Khelifa, with a very interesting talk, which is called From Invisible to Visible, How to Use New Media in Non-Fiction Storytelling. So first of all, I will introduce briefly Karim Ben Khelifa. He's an award-winning Belgian, Tunisian, transdisciplinary artist and director, whose narrative storytelling is at the convergence of art, science, and journalism. His practice is driven by a non-linear, cross-disciplinary approach, and he started his career as a word correspondent and photojournalist on assignment for publications such as Vanity Fair, the New York Times Magazine, Le Monde, Stern, Time Magazine, etc. He has traveled in more than 90 countries. He's also a speaker and has been a mentor at numerous conferences, festivals, and universities. He's a former fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University, an artist in residence at the Open Dog Lab, and a visiting artist at CAST, both at MIT. He's also currently an advisory board member of the Center for Advanced Virtuality at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So welcome, Karim. Welcome again to Mediamorphosis. And the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Damian. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you, Arnaud, for welcoming me to speak a bit about my work and what I've been doing following up the project of The Enemy. I don't know, maybe we can start just informally speaking about how I did get to new media. I was a photojournalist, as you mentioned, for about 18 years, and I grew up frustrated with my work as I could realize that my photographs were used in the context that often was a bit, not different, but I had another opinion to what I was seeing and what I was feeling on the ground and what I would have done. And slowly by slowly, I decided to start looking a bit differently, first within my medium, trying to use the medium in a different way, so the subject and the object of the work would be always well presented and well understood without too much diversion from that. And for that, moving from more wide-angle photography, frontline, being with the fighter, I decided to turn my camera and to start doing portraits. At the same time, I also asked the same protagonist a number of questions, and such as, who's your enemy? Why did you ever kill him? What is violence to you? What is peace to you? And where do you see yourself in 20 years? And I started doing this, making couples of enemies. So Israeli soldiers facing Palestinian fighters. And then I went to Kashmir and did the same in between the Indian military on the ground in Kashmir and the young Kashmiri trying to fight for the freedom and liberation of Kashmir. And then finally, I did that also in South Sudan, where you have tribes that are fighting for cattle and water points in an extremely violent way. And same again, two different tribes in the face-to-face. Those were photographs that I used and tried to push the medium a bit further than what I was used to do working for magazines. And then, as you mentioned, I became a fellow at the Open Documentary Lab at MIT. And the condition of my access to MIT was really, we like your work, but start to think about new technologies and see if you can find something that would suit the needs for your work. And then very quickly, I did discover virtual reality, and that is somehow how The Enemy was born.
I'd like to ask you, at what point exactly you consider virtual reality, augmented reality to enter the project? And which was the finality? Which was the purpose of using virtual reality or augmented reality instead of traditional media, such as more traditional photographs, audiovisual, etc.?
Well, when I discovered, really the day I discovered for the first time virtual reality, I understood the power of the medium. It was completely clear. And I think anyone who tried virtual reality for the first time would say, wow, okay, I understand it. I am in the medium. And with this quickly came questions. How do we move journalism to such a medium? And if we do so, and in my case, it was really interviews with fighters. But if we are in virtual reality, we're going to have more than if I do photograph or if I do just a recording of the voice. You're going to have body language too. And how does journalism move into that with new components that you need to deal with ethically and in terms of storytelling, in terms of engagement? So I had more questions than I had answers, and this is how I entered and decided to move with virtual reality to start with. And I think that's what the producer, France Télévisions, and the National Film Board in Canada were interested in. Virtual reality in 2013 was still a very nascent medium with no rules. We were not talking about 360 video. We were not talking about in-room VR. Such distinction today were not made. Virtual reality was anything that you would be immersed in a 360, but that could come from CGI to a 360 video. There was like not really any difference. And whether you stand or you sit or whether you walk, it was still virtual reality. Today, we start having some definition that clarify a bit the kind of experience you're going to have in, but those things were not in place when I started working on this project. And I think the partners were really interested in finding out what is this medium and how can we use it? How can we produce with it? What are the pitfalls? What are the best practice? All of this needed to be written. And I was fortunate enough to have my project being on the board of learning all of this and sharing it with the producer and at the later stage with the public.
Mm-hmm. We know that besides technology or before technology, there's narrative, there's topic, there's story. And which projects inspired you in order to create or to make up The Enemy? I mean, for example, at that point, or I don't know, maybe at that time, or maybe before, like The Machine to Be Another, which is from this collective, no, To Be Another Lab, or they were existing at that point, or from you?
No, actually, it came from me wanting to stop my frustrations with photography. So the first thing I did was a photo project where I did some portraits of the fighters. And I recorded their voice answering the questions. And if you can imagine a portrait on the wall and his enemy right in front, they're looking at each other. Of course, the portrait is not moving, it's a photograph. But there was a border in between those two places. And the audience, as they would move on one side or the other, would hear one fighter or would hear the other one. So already at that point, I was seeking audience to make choices in a way that, who do you want to listen first? And perhaps for some people is to listen to this one first, and perhaps for some other, it will be someone else. So it was a photo project. And when I discovered virtual reality, I realized it could be very interesting to adapt that project to virtual reality, which were just photograph. And what happened when you have the combatants in the room right in front of you, looking at you in the eyes, directly talking to you, what kind of engagement do we have there? What kind of memory does it leave to the audience, and what kind of knowledge is left over time to the audience?
So, in a sense, it was some kind of an aim to break this kind of a static frame, right?
Yeah.
Use the technologies in order to move things around and to create empathy, engagement, etc. Right? Okay, it's very interesting. Okay, and I'm going to the other side. Narrative is very nice, format, adjectives, fireworks, what you want. But who pays the party? I mean, which was the process of basically of the business model? How you got so much money to make this happen? No, it's like a big installation. You just made the installation, put the installation abroad, a lot of countries. It's amazing for us, for example, in Latin America, in Spain, this is science fiction because we not manage this kind of big amounts of money. How you manage that?
So I have a producer, obviously, that is producing, the executive producer, Chloé Jarry, and back in the days, Camera Lucida, which became Lucid Realities today. And France Télévisions, so the French broadcaster, had a unit called Les Nouvelles Écritures, the R&D department for new storytelling, a new form of storytelling. And they really do have a budget to invest in new form of storytelling. And again, in 2013, The Enemy was just an idea and a concept. The technology wasn't mature enough to have people walking in 300 meters square, but there was already this will to try and to experiment and to pay for this experimentation from the French broadcaster. Now, there is so much they can put, and we had to find some more partners. We had foundation in the US, the Sundance Institute helped us, the Tribeca Film Institute in New York helped us, numbers of foundation, the Soros Foundation, Doris Duke Foundation in California helped us. And then France Télévisions, so the broadcaster, lives through subsidies and it's a state money. And you have another organization called the Centre National de la Cinématographie, who's also there to help not only movies or anything, but the moving image to be produced, but at that point also new media. So we've gathered a lot of different partners around the project as we went along. And one of the last partners that came on board was actually Google, the Digital News Initiative, where they look at this form of journalism and were interested to see how that performs with the public and find the best practices. So we could spend the money the way we wanted, and we didn't have to use any Google products or any Google headset or anything like this. For them, the interest in this was really push that out, see with the audience. We're interested in finding out how that happen, how that run, what are the pitfalls, and what are the best practice in terms of distribution of such a work.
But as we can see, more or less, we can see this kind of budget strategy from different components, in the sense that a broadcaster involved, like France Télévisions, Arte, etc., a TV or a media producer, no, Cita, for example, and we have as well the government, French government, the CNC, and Google, which is a technological developer. No, it's like from different sides, because you just got an incredible amount of money. Not an incredible, but for a project, it's very like for a non-fiction project, let's say, very straight. It's very, very nice, really.
And it's really rare to have such
really hot. But it's very important because projects like The Enemy, it's like a milestone, it's like a milestone in terms of virtual reality, but as well in terms of reality, non-fiction, extended reality, and we need milestones in order to put some kind of canon of projects in front of or at the table. No, it's very nice. The Enemy is very nice. I'm a fan of The Enemy. I told you in Bolivia when we met at Mediamorfosis 2018. And closing this very huge project that you did in the past, The Enemy, which we recommend, and we will see the trailer very, very, very soon of the project in order to give you a glimpse of this amazing project. What about The Enemy today? Or not after, but what will be The Enemy? What will be like the
long life
advice, or what is happening today with people in the world after the coronavirus? How do you feel The Enemy today? Because, people in the streets, I just went to Barcelona today, all the people is like very, very like fighting in the street, saying it's scary sometimes. So what happened to this? In theory, we should connect more with others after the virus and understand more that we are all the same. We are all connected, but it's the other side. What do you feel about that today?
I think this is a universal subject, the polarization and the story about the other is as long as we were making clan in the old age, thousands of years ago, discovering fire and having a small group of people that you depend on, and the group is the strength and not the individual. And I think from that point on, as soon as something foreign to that group would come, there would be preconceptions, there would be fear, there would be a number of things that could trigger some very basic instincts of rejections to others. And then, we started learning, we started writing, we started doing things that should facilitate exchange in between people. But there is this nature in human beings to say we are different than the other. There is a beautiful, in that sense, a beautiful poetry from Rudyard Kipling, who spoke about the other, until he realized that if he crossed the channel and goes on the other side, he's going to see himself as the other. This is it's happening, but definitely, I think we're living in a world today where crisis and anxiety is much more present in our daily life. And that kind of reaffirmed the fear that people have, the sensitivity they have, and probably also the way they express it. So as soon as you feel threatened, you will turn back to your own people. Talking of empathy is a great thing, but there is so many different kind of empathy. You and I, and everyone listening to this talk, we have a characterial empathy, more or less than different people. But then you have different kind of empathy that are just set in motion in the place you are. Contextual empathy is one of them. And then we need to remember that empathy can also be the opposite of what we think. If you start creating empathy for your own people against the other, then empathy is not empathy the way we understand it. I've stopped so much using this word for my work, saying I'm trying to create empathy, using a much more religiously charged words, which is compassion. Which is for me a better sense of acknowledging the other without risking to create a rift in between you and this other if you start creating empathy for your own people as opposed to what you were expecting to do. So compassion seems to be for me a better word to use, and the world we're living in needs a lot of compassion, needs a lot of reaching out to the other side.
I've heard in one talk that maybe empathy should be or could be substituted for compassion in reality. No, so they are synonyms, but on the other side, it's very important, like the specific contribution of compassion. Okay, let me jump to your new project, which could be like a short or a story that could help people understand the human cost that went into producing their smartphones. 7 grams. Yeah. Could you tell us 5 cents about 7 grams, please?
I can tell you a bit more than that. 7 grams. 7 grams is a free app you're going to be able to download on your App Store, Android, or Apple Store. And it tells the story of your smartphone through your smartphone using its augmented reality capabilities. Meaning, what we're going to be doing here is, first of all, make you discover where some of the minerals, such as cobalt, tungsten, gold, or cassiterite, are used in your mobile phone. And for this, your mobile phone will go into pieces right in front of you, and you're going to approach, it's a cloud of pieces, you're going to approach that cloud and discover the components in which those minerals are used, why they use them, why they are indispensable, because they all have characteristics and capabilities that other minerals don't have. And so you're going to go through those 4 minerals and discovering within your phone where they're used and how. And then from there, we're going to go down to, there is 1.2 billion smartphones being produced this year. 5 billion smartphones are in circulation today. In order to build just the smartphones, and you need a lot of those minerals. It happened that one country has a lot of them. But not only that, that country has also cheap labor, which goes very conveniently with the resources. And that country is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the artisanal miners digging those minerals that end up in our phone for us to have such a powerful experience with those powerful tools, they are completely left behind. A lot of injustice, 130 armed groups roaming in Congo, and that are taking civilians kidnapped, bringing them to mines and forcing them to work in those mines for their benefit. So that is not only what is happening. You have armed groups doing this, but then you also have artisanal miners working in mines that are not under the control of armed groups, but the working conditions there are horrendous. They would never be accepted in Europe or nowhere in the US or nowhere in the Western world. It's just too dangerous. But they don't have any other choice. And they should, as a matter of fact, keep mining because those are their own resources. But they should mine in better condition, in condition where a tunnel doesn't collapse on 15 miners because it was just maintained with some wooden beam, having people with no protective gears going down 50 meters in the pit, no helmets, no boots, nothing that can actually protect them in case of any trouble. And I think it's important for the people who have a smartphone and indirectly computers, tablets, to understand that at the start of the supply chain, there's a lot of suffering that can happen. And it's our duty as consumer to ask for a supply chain that is void of human rights abuse. It's our role as consumers to ask Apple, Samsung, Huawei that our money is not there to support violences somewhere. Congo is really rich, and at no point I'm advocating for boycotting Congo's minerals. As a matter of fact, we couldn't do that because they simply have too much. But to force those companies that are the richest companies in the world to make sure that the minerals they are using have not been subject to human rights abuse in their extractions, whether it's an armed group or whether it's extremely poor condition, no days off, no security for the artisanal miners in Eastern Congo. This is a reality we're trying to make discover to the user, again, through the smartphone. So the very object that is the medium become also the subject.
It's clear that this is a pressing issue. And basically, I want to ask you another simple question, which is going from the global, to the local. I mean, you have the whole story, which is it's impossible to tell this reality. And then you goes down and you take this global story to a specific character, which is chance, right? Yeah. Chance, and then you put the MTC Eastern Congo guerrilla group, Cheka, yeah. You create a conflict. Explain a little bit about this local story that reflects on the global side.
Yeah. So, when you talk about 5 billion smartphones, 100 million servers in the world, 2 million kilometers of undersea water, more than 2,000 satellites of communication, you have a full infrastructure for this to work. And it's a global phenomenon. Yet, we need to go back to the human because what is important in this is the suffering of the people. Chance, his name he carries his name very well, was a young man at 12 years old, was kidnapped and brought to one of those armed groups, NDCR, as you mentioned. But Chance or NDCR, the group, are just an example. There is 130 armed groups and thousands of people like Chance. So Chance managed to escape when he was 18. So we can take his testimony and make that testimony personal to the audience so they can feel the suffering that went into his life, the danger and the horrible thing he had to do in order for us to have those very powerful tools in our hands. And it's to give a human face to a global trade. And when that global trade doesn't do its supply chain transparency, efficiently, then people like Chance end up suffering. And it is for them, ultimately, that I'm doing the work. It is for that situation to change and to bring it from a global to a local. You want to personify this through the life of someone. And Chance is one of those persons. I had a lot of exchange with him, understanding everything that he went through, the suffering and the pain, but most importantly, the resilience he needed to have. From 12 to 18 to 6 years, either fighting other armed groups, defending territories, or either going down at the heart of the mountain with no equipment, just a hammer and a shovel, and hitting the stone to find gold or cassiterite, and then bring it back to the light, meaning to the armed group, so they could sell it. And I really wanted to find a story, and there is a lot of those stories in Congo, but to find someone who's able to say that with all his fragility and all his power, because he went through and he survived it. And for one Chance that survived it, how many didn't? How many don't have a voice?
How you met this character? I mean, as a journalist, did you make a research, or you have a contact or a producer in the Democratic Republic of Congo who made the work for you?
You go on the ground, you do your research. I've been meeting a lot of different people in Congo at different stages, the smugglers, the people who sell the minerals directly, and going all along the chain like this to find out who. I mean, when I started, I thought I would need a few characters, and then finally one character stood out with all the stories that I wanted to put in, which is injustice, pain, resilience, and courage, and all of this with very simple words that everyone can understand and kind of feel for him.
And in terms of, we talk about a little bit narrative. Now let's jump to format, to platform, to technology. Why you chose animation and augmented reality this time? Why do you think that these two formats could convey this story?
Well, I think the starting point for me was when I was in the mines in Eastern Congo. I was photographing with my phone until I realized, it struck me that actually they're mining what is in my phone here. And so the relation became obvious for me at that point, that I needed to tell that story through the phone. Then augmented reality became obvious because that was the new technology coming out. And why the animation is because the life of Chance, the animation part is only the life of Chance, but the life of Chance is full of violence. And it is hard to tell that story without using animation, which allows a number of things to go through the narrative without having to show them. And yet it carries the pain, it carries this resilience that I wanted to show that people like Chance have, and people like us in the Western world would never have the capacity to survive 6 months in the same conditions. So the will to live, the will to survive is way stronger for Chance in those situations at 12, 13, 14 years old than it can be for us. Animation versus augmented reality is also two different techniques in which you can. Augmented reality is a fantastic medium because it offers you a lot of freedom to move around the subject that you're developing, but it can be also tiring to always have your phone in front of you. So it's about shifting position. It's about having someone able to sit down for a minute and watch that movie, which is actually 6 minutes, and then really take the time to take the story in, and the engagement to move around the augmented reality. I'd say more, the animation is a charcoal drawing, stop action movie, meaning you have a drawing, basic drawing, you make a photograph, and from that you're going to erase and then redraw a bit, make another photograph. And the movie is 4,400 drawings, simultaneous drawings. So it's work intensive. But what is in the charcoal is the mineral, is the texture, is this powder that you can conglomerate and make a pencil with, but it's there on the paper. And for me, is really moving from the fully digital world to something that has texture, something that reminds us of Mother Earth, where we are, and elements from it. And when you're talking about mining, here you go. You have powder and dust all over on these drawings, and I think the techniques and the texture really gives life to a powerful story in a way that I didn't want it to present it with a normal movie or using any other animation techniques. I really wanted to have the texture and the ability to tell the story of chance through that medium and through that background that you always feel in it.
I do believe that animation has a lot to do with documentary, especially in terms of extreme reality. Could help, no? It's a good complement in order not to show the most terrific scenes or stories, no, that you want to avoid that kind of reality. Which I think that it's really a good choice on your side. So congrats, because I'm sure that will be a great project. Going to the last part of the project, because I assume that part of the funding is a reality today. Here, more or less, the partners are the same. I mean, from France, CNC, France Télévisions, so the formula. You repeat the formula, or the traditional partners that help you in the enemy believe you again in this new adventure?
Yeah, they do. They did. So I was very lucky and fortunate to work again with France Télévisions, and even though teams, in those big organizations get to change along the years, and people end up being very different from the start to the end, and the people I'm working with and the people I've started working in 2013 there. But yes, they were there, and the Centre National de la Cinématographie in Paris were there. PBS in the US also was there. So we have those partners that directly found the sense of the project with the proposition, with using the smartphone to tell the story of the smartphone. All of this is completely coherent for them. And again, it's a new medium in which we need to experiment how we tell stories and how we produce stories for this. So there was a lot of interest also as how are we going to tell that stories, and what will be the principle and the level of engagement using a medium that is not virtual reality, that start to be a bit known today by creators and different broadcasters and the founders. Augmented reality is still relatively new. And when it comes to journalism, it's even more rare to have storytelling from journalism going into using augmented reality today. So again, it was really trying to experiment with this new medium and tell the story in the most powerful and compelling way, using that medium and shifting to charcoal movie within the app, to give people a breather, and also the reality of what's happening on the ground, and a chance to feel connected and feel that they don't want their electronics to participate in any form of violence. And now I'm hoping that once they know that, within the app, we have a pledge that people can publish saying, I will repair, I will recycle, and I will buy refurbished electronics in order to lower the demand on the supply chain. The future is with more electronics. The future is not with less electronics. So we're going to need those minerals to make them work. But it's time to make sure that people like Chance or other people in Eastern Congo are not at the end of the line, completely forgotten by the prowess of technology and crushed under misery, poverty, because those companies are making sure everything is pushed to the minimum. And it's very important that those companies know that the users, the same way we want organic foods, bio foods, you have a huge market today in this because people have requested it. They wanted to stop this form of industrial foods. We need to ask somehow the same thing when it comes to to our electronics, that they are abuse-free, blood-free, and human rights void, and no abuse in this in our electronics. I'm taking the smartphone as an example, but it goes for tablets, computers, name it, cars, they are all over.
In terms of the last part, I mean, in terms of launching and the forthcoming distribution of a project, which is your strategy in this case? I mean, how you design this strategy, assuming that this is not a traditional production that has a premiere of a feature movie?
So the point here is really to make a proposition to media that they can have the work, the app, for free on the condition that there is a translation, there is a local version on it, they can publish the app. Our goal for us is to have a maximum of people looking at this. It's not a business model in a way that we're not selling the app. We're not trying to recoup the money that has been invested. The money that has been invested in this work are subsidized by the French government and the US. And they're not linked to any benefits. The point is not to sell the app and have a huge success. The point is to not sell the app and have a huge success. So media partnerships are one way to go around. NGOs working on the same subject have reached to their own audiences, and festivals and different. We're taking all the avenue we can to make sure this is seen by as many people as we can. But definitely the most promising avenue is the media. They don't have the money to create such a thing, yet they can put their hand on it for a very fraction of the price and bring audiences that are the younger audiences, Generation Z, that is native in those electronics and smartphones, but probably not aware of the injustice that went into manufacturing them. And so telling the story to those people is also, for the media brands, bringing new and younger audience to their brands, which is often an older brands, because those magazines and newspapers are often in place for a long time. And to renew the brand, to make the brand sexy again to some extent, what best than using new media that people can download, experience, and then suddenly look, this is journalism the way I haven't experienced it so far. And with this associated the name of the brands and thinking, wow, they're doing new things that are interesting. And in that sense, trying also for the brands, to the media, to experiment with this, to see what sticks, what are the reaction of the audiences. Do they want more? Do they want it longer? Was it something that was an engagement on the social media after? All of this is an experimentation to see for the media, but a cheap experiment compares to the price that is to build such a project.
And finally, one last question, which I'm very interested to put on the table, is about reaching the audiences, creating some impact. Which is the message that you want to establish or to put there for audiences regarding the enemy on one side and regarding 7 grams? Which could be for you the final message, or the more important or the more deep message that you want to transfer to your audience, to your users?
Thank you very much. Because actually, that's the title of this conference those conversations we have together. There are things that are invisible. Humanity in between two enemies, believe me, is completely invisible. And those 7 grams within your phone are not completely invisible. If you open it, you can start seeing a bit of gold and a bit of that. But who sees that in our phone today? Well, we don't see any gold. I don't see any cobalt in this. It's invisible. So with this is trying to use the medium and the new media for what they're good at. And one thing they're really good at is to show the extremely small or the extremely big in completely new ways. And in this case, for the enemy, it was really trying to put across, trust me, there is humanity in between the fighters that is shared. They still have something in common that they don't recognize from each other. But if you come and check the enemy, you realize this by yourself. And same goes for 7 grams. My promise is you will from now on know about those 7 grams in your phone. And and I'm hoping you're going to be buying accordingly, and you're going to repair and recycle your electronics. So there is more of a chance for people like Charles to not end up in an armed group, and for the other artisanal miners that are not under violences of armed groups to have better working conditions, better tools, better rights in their practices. They need to feed their family, and today mining the minerals we have for our phone is really enough for feeding their families, send their kids to school. And I think that's the message I'm trying to push across. We're really happy to have those phones. Our life has completely changed with this. But it happened that life of people in Congo has completely changed too, and not necessarily for the better.
Thank you very much, Karim Ben Khelifa. It's a great pleasure to have you with us another year in this 2021 edition of Mediamorfosis. And I wish you the best luck for your new project. I will be there. I'm your first fan. So good luck and take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnau, and thank you, the team at Mediamorfosis. And see you one of those next year on the grounds.